So the Odyssey, an ancient poem from Greek mythology, is back in the cultural zeitgeist, thanks to Christopher Nolan announcing that he's going to be making an adaptation of it. Along with Epic the Musical recently wrapping up its final saga, this has been a big year for Homer, good for him. There was some discourse online because people were shocked to learn that there were those who had never heard of the Odyssey, especially since there were those who had to study it in school. Personally, Em and I didn't have to study it in school ourselves. Although our father was a big fan of Greek mythology, I couldn't even watch Disney's Hercules around him because he kept pointing out the inaccuracies. Like Hercules is his Roman name, and it's really weird that they're using all the gods' Greek names except for his. Or how in the myth Heracles killed Meg and his family because Hera cursed him with madness, and Hera was his enemy, not Hades. And Zeus was not a loving family man, at all. Sure, it's not accurate to the source material, but to be fair, Disney usually does that anyway. And besides, the source material is not exactly appropriate for children, so I'm not really surprised. But still, it's a good movie for what it is. Anyway, he thought that the Odyssey would be a good bedtime story for us. Personally, I don't think it did. Hey girls, want to hear about how all of Odysseus' friends died horribly? We were like 6 at the time. Thanks, Dad. Honestly, we both had lots of nightmares about it. The Odyssey is filled with monsters, and honestly, Scylla is horrifying. Don't get me wrong, good story, but maybe not the most appropriate for a bedtime story. So the Odyssey is a sequel to the Iliad. It follows King Odysseus of Ithaca, who is desperately trying to return home after a 10-year brutal war. And the return trip ends up being a lot worse for him than the war itself, where he runs into terrible monsters, vengeful gods, and creepy stalkers, until he loses his entire fleet. Spoilers, by the way, for a book that came out like 2,700 years ago. Anyway, the book has been highly influential for eons now. I mean, it's where we get the word Odyssey from after all. And now it's inspired Epic. And if you've never heard of the Odyssey, I think that this is a good way to be introduced to it. It's very accessible. The music is extremely catchy and has a lot of variety. And the storytelling is handled really well. But I think Epic does a really good job at getting you inside Odysseus' mind and humanizing him. He's often portrayed as this legendary, mythical figure, which, I mean, technically he is, but they're able to make him relatable. They literally have a song about how he's just a man, and it's a major motif throughout the musical. And he's a character you can root for even at his lowest moments. And it really establishes the connection between him and his home and family. His goal throughout the narrative is to make it home to his wife and son, after being forced into a war he never wanted a part of, but is constantly delayed for one reason or another, and in some of the worst ways possible, causing him to become more and more desperate. And I think they really nailed the relationship between Odysseus and his family, and his devotion to his wife Penelope. Their love story ends up being the backbone for the show, and it's a great payoff. After all, everything he does is to get home to her and Telemachus. And it understands Odysseus as a character. The creator, Jorge Rivera Harán, wanted to create something that was inspired by video games and anime, and I think he was able to accomplish that pretty well, even if it made him take liberties with the story. But it's an adaptation that knows what it wants to be, and I think it captures the spirit of the Odyssey as a whole, even with all the liberties they took. And Epic made some changes that I actually think work really well, and wouldn't mind seeing in the Nolan version, like how the poem is told out of order. It actually starts with Telemachus, who's on a search for his father, and when we do meet Odysseus, he's recounting his misadventures to the Phoenicians. Honestly, I think starting with the Trojan horse makes a lot of sense, both narratively and thematically. It quickly establishes everything we need to know, who these people are, what they're doing, and what their goals are, both as a group and individually. It also helps with show don't tell. Much of the Odyssey is just Odysseus telling other characters what happened to him, and I think it's more effective to have us just see it, which is why it's such a prominent rule nowadays anyway. I also don't really care for how Homer switches between first and third person. It feels inconsistent. I also like the changes they made to Circe and Poseidon. In the original, he never actually meets Poseidon, which I feel like is a missed opportunity. Since Poseidon has such a deep hatred for him, there's a great opportunity for drama, which the musical takes advantage of. And that drama is intense, and I'm here for it. Then there's Circe, who's a complex character in her own right. She starts out as an antagonist, but eventually helps them out. But in the original Odyssey, Odysseus had to degrade himself in order to win her favor, and a lot of people tend to use that against him, and frankly it comes off as victim blaming to me. In the poem, Hermes warns him that he cannot deny a goddess, but also tells him of her true intentions, which is to kill the men and humiliate him. But eventually Odysseus is able to convince her to turn his men back from pigs, and Circe actually ends up feeling sorry for them and for her actions, once she sees how elated they are to see each other safe, and then they all end up dying anyway, which makes the scene really sad in retrospect, but I digress. In Epic, Odysseus is able to convince Circe to help them out without having to degrade himself. While it deviates from the source material, they get to the same place anyway. And honestly, I'm sick of people using this against Odysseus. It's like they don't understand power dynamics and coercion. And then in Calypso's case, she literally mind-controlled him, and he spends most of his time sitting on the beach crying. But despite these facts, people still consider him a cheater. Like, I really don't care for his portrayal in Hades 2, where not only do I feel like they misportrayed Odysseus, they also get numerous facts about the Odyssey wrong. Not only do they claim that Odysseus willingly cheated on his wife, with both Circe and Calypso, they also claim that he just left Circe's island and never returned, basically ghosting her. Which is not true. He returned to the island to bury Elpenor, specifically at Elpenor's request, and he saw Circe again there. When Odysseus is given the ability to say no, he does say no. Like with Nausicaa when he was with the Phoenicians. It's just that no isn't usually an option for him, unfortunately. Also, Calypso offered him immortality and he still chose to go home. I'm just saying, people really misconstrued this character. As for Calypso in Epic, they really lean into her tragic backstory. Her song, I'm Not Sorry for Loving You, is a great song, but it's very much from her perspective. It's more like she's feeling sorry for herself rather than giving him a sincere apology. Odie literally tried to jump off a cliff because of her, but I do wish they had called her out more on her actions. She did hold Odie hostage for 7 years, constantly harassing him and pressuring him. You can have a sympathetic character and still hold them accountable. Granted, Calypso probably doesn't fully understand how bad what she did really was, but I think it would have been good to make that clear to the audience. But overall, I think Epic the Musical does a great job with both its music and its storytelling. Although if I had to nitpick, I would probably say that they could have specified that this was Telemachus during Legendary. Pretty much every character is named when they're introduced, except for Zeus, but it's pretty obvious when he shows up. But I saw multiple people just assume he was Odysseus, not realizing this was a different character. Maybe they could have had Penelope calling him or something, just to make it more obvious. But I would definitely recommend Epic. Anyway, while I find the Odyssey to be a really good but really sad story, my only major criticism of it is that Hermes didn't give Odysseus his winged sandals when he was leaving Calypso's island, which seemed like the obvious play, and it's something he did for Perseus. Instead, Odysseus has to deal with Charybdis and meeting the Phoenicians in the first place. No offense to the Phoenicians, I'm just saying. Overall, I think Epic is an amazing musical, and one that people should definitely check out. And I'm curious about the Christopher Nolan movie. I really hope they do the story justice. Maybe someday we'll get a movie version of Epic the Musical. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, those are my general thoughts on the Odyssey. Have you read it? Did you like Epic the Musical? I definitely recommend it. It's on YouTube and Spotify. And what are your thoughts on Christopher Nolan's new movie? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to @Ziner on Twitter for doing some cool fan art of the two of us and our cat Ava. They also did another piece inspired by Dr. Seuss, which is really fun and whimsical. Thank you so much for the fan art, we really appreciate it. I'd also like to give a shout out to the members: Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Equestron, Norman Sweet Cream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Lucas Geist, Jay Draws, Meowsers, Sky, Philip, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Tobias Weller, Bandito Bane, Mac B909, Dakari the Professor, Jin the Goblin, Todd McCaffrey, Omni Fair, Crimson Phantom, Datadyne Executive, Alto Burrito 9506, Caleb Nelson, Cavalcoge, Strider Exile, Killer Bomb, User Not Found Yet, Owen Wildish, Slava Saporgas, and Entwined Boot 301. Thank you for the support. And if you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And that part's free. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.